Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
Living with severe depression isn't easy. I've been battling it for over 3 decades now, and trust me when I say I've tried everything. When I say everything, I mean everything. From traditional medications to experimental treatments, clinical trials, transcranial magnetic stimulation, electroconvulsive therapy, and even that new esketamine treatment everyone's been talking about. Nothing seemed to work quite right. After years of trial and error, my doctors and I finally found something that at least keeps me going. An antidepressant at 30 milligrams. It's not perfect, but it keeps me stable enough to function while we continue searching for better options. You'd think after 30 years of dealing with medical professionals, I'd seen it all. Well, apparently not. Last week I needed to refill my prescription. Simple enough, right? I've been getting these refills from the same pharmacy for years now. I called them up and that's when I encountered him, the know-it-all pharmacist who'd been working there for quite some time. I politely greeted him and requested a refill for my prescription. After giving him all my information, things took an interesting turn. He responded in a condescending tone, telling me that I shouldn't be on that high of a dosage. He claimed the limit was 20 milligrams and refused to send in the request. Now I know my medication inside and out. I've been on it long enough to understand that while 20 milligrams might be the limit for some conditions, it's not a universal rule. This guy didn't even have access to my full diagnosis, yet here he was, trying to play doctor. I bluntly told him that, if I only took 20 milligrams, I wouldn't be alive today. The silence that followed was deafening. You could practically hear his self-righteousness deflating. He started stammering, backtracking on his previous stance. He mumbled something about it being between me and my doctor, and said he would send in the refill request after all. I gave him a brief thanks and hung up, but I wasn't done. After 3 decades of dealing with depression, I've learned to advocate for myself. I called back and asked to speak with the head pharmacist. I explained that I needed to report a concerning interaction I just had with one of their pharmacists. The head pharmacist asked what the problem was, and I explained the situation in detail, making sure to mention that this same medication is prescribed up to 80 milligrams for other conditions. I expressed my concern about other patients potentially being denied their medication or made to feel wrong because of this pharmacist's misconceptions. The head pharmacist was immediately apologetic. They acknowledged that I was right about prescription dosages varying based on diagnosis and individual needs, and promised to address this with their staff right away. 2 days later, when I went to pick up my prescription, I noticed the know-it-all pharmacist was being shadowed by a supervisor, apparently getting some much-needed retraining on proper pharmacy protocols. He couldn't even look me in the eye when I walked up to the counter. The head pharmacist pulled me aside and thanked me for bringing the issue to their attention. They told me that they'd implemented additional training for all their staff to prevent similar incidents and commended my medication knowledge, saying it probably exceeded that of many healthcare workers. I responded by expressing my hope that no one else would have to justify their prescribed medication to someone who doesn't have their full medical history. My mom raised me as a single parent after my dad passed away when I was just 12. She worked 2 jobs to put me through college, and now that I'm a successful software engineer, it's my turn to take care of her. She was diagnosed with early onset Alzheimer's 3 years ago, and it's been getting progressively worse. I moved her into my house last year when she started forgetting to turn off the stove and would sometimes wander outside in the middle of the night. The problem was, I couldn't work from home all the time, and my job required occasional travel. That's when I decided to hire an elderly care worker. The care worker seemed perfect on paper, 15 years of experience, glowing recommendations, and a gentle demeanor that made my mom feel comfortable right away. She was in her 50s, and something about her reminded me of those sweet lunch ladies from elementary school. For 6 months, everything was great. My mom was well cared for, always clean and fed, and seemed happy. Then I started noticing small things going missing. At first, it was just a bracelet here, a ring there. My mom sometimes misplaced things due to her condition, so I didn't think much of it. But when my mother's wedding ring disappeared, the one thing she never took off, I knew something was wrong. I installed security cameras in the common areas of the house but told no one. The footage from the first few days showed nothing unusual, but on day 4 I caught something that made my blood boil. The care worker was going through my mom's jewelry box while my mother was napping. She would try on different pieces, pocket some, and then carefully rearrange what was left to make it look undisturbed. I was furious but decided to catch her in the act. The next day I pretended to leave for work but parked around the corner and snuck back in through the garage. As expected, once she thought the coast was clear, she headed straight to my mom's room. I asked her if she was looking for something. She spun around, my mother's pearl necklace in her hands, a family heirloom from my grandmother. She tried to cover it up by claiming that my mother had asked her to organize the jewelry. I pointed out how ridiculous that excuse was, since my mom could barely remember what day it was, let alone ask someone to organize her jewelry. The care worker got defensive, saying she didn't appreciate my tone and insisted she'd been nothing but good to my mother. I told her to put the necklace down and told her that I had her on camera stealing multiple times and that I was calling the police. That's when her whole demeanor changed. The sweet lunch lady persona vanished, replaced by something dark and threatening. She started making threats about how she spent 8 hours alone with my mom every day. She talked about how accidents could happen, wrong pills, bad falls, and warned that even if I fired her, she could come back when we least expected it. I felt my hand shaking, but not from fear, from rage. I asked her if that was a threat, and she confirmed it was a promise. She demanded I delete the videos and forget everything, or my mom would have an unfortunate accident. She even bragged that even if she got caught, the damage would already be done. I told her there were a few things she should know. I pulled out my phone and stopped the recording app. I then revealed that I'd been recording our entire conversation, that everything was caught on security cameras uploading to cloud storage, and that 2 police officers were in my garage listening through my phone's live audio feed. The color drained from her face as my garage door opened and 2 police officers walked in. She accused me of lying, but I wasn't finished. I explained that I'd taken the last 2 days off work to document everything she'd stolen, and we'd found her online marketplace account, where she'd been selling stolen jewelry. I told her the police had been building a case since yesterday. The officers stepped forward with handcuffs and read her rights. As they led her away, she broke down crying and begging, claiming she needed the money for her sick husband. But the officers had already discovered she wasn't even married. It was all part of her act. The investigation revealed she had been doing this for years, targeting elderly patients and their families across 3 different states. She would work for a family for several months to gain their trust, steal their valuables, and move on before anyone could catch her. Some families had lost family heirlooms worth tens of thousands of dollars. They found most of my mom's jewelry in her apartment, along with pieces stolen from at least 12 other families. She was charged with multiple counts of theft, elderly abuse, and extortion. The evidence was so overwhelming that she took a plea deal, 15 years in prison. I hired a new care worker after that, but this time I did much more thorough background checks and installed a complete security system. My mom's wedding ring and all her other jewelry are now in a safe that only I can access. The new care worker has been with us for 8 months now, and while my mom's condition continues to progress, at least I know she's truly being cared for by someone who deserves our trust. Growing up on our family farm in Iowa, I spent countless hours watching him work on that 2004 Chevy Silverado 1500. It wasn't just any truck, it was the one he taught me to drive in when I was 14, letting me practice in the back fields where no one would see us. Every dent and scratch on that truck had a story, and most of them involved me learning something new about farming, mechanics, or life in general. When I turned 16, Dad promised me the truck would be mine when I turned 18. I worked my tail off those 2 years, saving up money from odd jobs and helping neighbors with their farms. The deal was simple: $1,000 cash, and he'd write me a bill of sale. The title would come on my 18th birthday. When I finally had all the money saved up, I told my father excitedly. He responded with pride, saying I had earned the truck fair and square. I still remember how proud I felt when he handed me that bill of sale. He even helped me take photos of every angle of the truck, saying it was important to document its condition. Everything was fine for about 6 months. I used that truck for everything: hauling feed, helping with harvests, and even taking my first date to the county fair. But things started changing when my father began dating this woman. She moved in pretty quick, and suddenly everything about the farm had to change to suit her taste. One day, I overheard them talking. His girlfriend was complaining about how the old truck was an eyesore and needed to go. When my father reminded her that he had promised it to me, she dismissed his concerns, saying it was bringing down the property value and that I was too young to need something like that. I didn't think much of it at the time. After all, I had the bill of sale, and my father had given me his word. But then came that fateful day when I was hauling a load of scrap metal. The rear tire carrier had been rusting, something I'd been meaning to fix, and the tire blew out on County Road 23. I called my father for help, asking if he could grab my spare from our farm shop. When he asked for my location, I told him I was about 3 miles east of Miller's Crossing. He simply said he would take care of it. I thought he meant he'd help. Instead, 30 minutes later, a police cruiser pulled up behind me. Next thing I knew, I was being cuffed and told I was driving a stolen vehicle. My own father had reported the truck stolen. I spent 6 hours in a holding cell before they finally let me call someone. I tried explaining about the bill of sale, but I didn't have it with me. It was in my dresser drawer at home. By the time I got out, the truck was gone. It took me 3 days to find out what happened. My former friend from high school, let's call him the buyer, came by the farm to pick up some tools he'd borrowed. That's when he reluctantly told me the truth. He explained that my father had sold him the truck for just $400, making him promise to make it disappear and ensure I never saw it again. When I protested, telling him about my bill of sale, he just shrugged and mentioned that his girlfriend hated the truck too, and he'd already started parting it out. I was devastated. That truck wasn't just transportation. It was every good memory I had with my father before he changed. Every fishing trip, every late-night emergency repair during harvest season, every lesson he taught me about responsibility, all of it was tied to that truck. It took me 2 weeks to find the bill of sale. I'd been so angry I'd torn apart my room, but it was right where I'd left it. That's when I decided enough was enough. I took it to a lawyer who specialized in property disputes. The lawyer didn't just help me get the truck back, they helped me build a case against my father for false arrest and emotional distress. Turns out, reporting a vehicle stolen when you've sold it is a serious offense. The buyer tried claiming he bought it in good faith, but the $400 price tag for a functioning truck raised red flags with the judge. The court ordered my father to pay for all the parts that had been stripped from the truck, plus damages for the false arrest. The judge was particularly upset about a father deliberately setting up his own son for arrest. The buyer had to return all the parts he'd removed and pay for professional reinstallation. But the real satisfaction came when my father's girlfriend left him after he had to sell his prized tractor to pay the damages. She was complaining about how she couldn't be with someone who'd choose a broken-down truck over their happiness. I got my truck back 3 months ago. It's not quite the same. Some parts had to be replaced with newer ones, but every time I drive it now, it reminds me that standing up for yourself is just as important as all those other lessons my father taught me. The new dents and scratches will tell different stories, but they'll be my stories to tell. My life was going pretty well. I had a stable job as an accountant, a small but cozy apartment, and was even thinking about getting back into the dating scene after my divorce 2 years ago. Then came the diagnosis: stage 2 breast cancer. The next 8 months were a blur of hospital visits, chemotherapy sessions, and countless nights spent hunched over the toilet. My sister was my rock through it all. She lived just 15 minutes away and would come over regularly to help clean my apartment, cook meals, or just sit with me while I tried to keep down whatever soup I could manage that day. Losing my hair was probably one of the hardest parts. I remember sitting on my bathroom floor, crying as clumps of it came out in my hands. I got some nice wigs, one that matched my original brown hair, and another in a fun auburn shade I'd always wanted to try. They helped me feel somewhat normal during treatment. When my oncologist finally told me I was in remission, it felt like I could breathe again. My hair had started growing back just about half an inch all around, like a silver buzz cut. After wearing wigs for so long, I decided it was time to embrace my new look. It took me 3 days just to work up the courage to go outside without a wig. That day, I was heading to my sister's house for Sunday lunch, our new tradition to celebrate my recovery. I pulled up in her driveway feeling pretty confident. The weather was nice, and I put on my favorite sundress. I even added some earrings to complement my new short hair. As I was getting out of my car, her neighbor spotted me. He was watering his lawn and immediately stopped what he was doing to walk over. I'd seen him a few times before when visiting my sister, but we'd never really talked. The first thing he did was criticize my hair, telling me that my severe haircut didn't suit me at all. I froze. My hand was still on the car door and I felt like someone had dumped ice water down my back. All the confidence I built up that morning evaporated instantly. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. Then, something inside me snapped. I blurted out that this was my hair growing back after chemotherapy for cancer. His mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water, and his face turned 3 different shades of red. He started stammering, trying to form an apology but couldn't get the words out properly. He started backing away, tripping over his own feet, and the garden hose he'd dropped was now spraying water everywhere, soaking his pants. My sister, who had heard the commotion from her front porch, came marching over. She asked what was going on, and I explained that the neighbor had just given me his unwanted opinion about my hair. My sister was shocked and outraged. My sister, all 5 feet 7 inches of her, turned to face him with such fury that he actually took another step back, right into the stream of water from his abandoned hose. She demanded to know who raised him to think it was okay to comment on someone's appearance like that, and if he had any idea what I've been through. The neighbor was now completely soaked, stammering apologies while trying to turn off the hose and maintain what little dignity he had left. My sister wasn't done though. She warned him to keep his opinions to himself from now on, or they would have a serious problem. She also threatened to tell his wife about what had happened. He practically ran back to his house, leaving the hose running on his lawn. As we watched him retreat, my sister put her arm around my shoulders and squeezed, asking if I was okay. I told her I was, and I really meant it, because at that moment, watching him run away, soaking wet and thoroughly humiliated, I realized something. I was still here, I was healthy, and I was strong enough to stand up for myself. My hair would grow back, but I doubted he'd ever recover from the embarrassment of that day. His wife did find out, and she made him bring over a huge gift basket with a heartfelt apology letter the next day. I heard through my sister that she made him attend a sensitivity training course at their church too. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.